Alright, today we're having a look at some Roman Republican silver denarii. This is the second installment of a video I made previously on the same topic, which I'll leave a link in the description down below if you want to watch it later. Okay, so let's explore these 5 denarii. What do they have to tell us? These are quite different to imperial denarii, whose iconography serves simply to praise a single man, the emperor. Republican denarii were a powerful political tool used by lots of people. Every year, 3 young, aspiring Roman politicians starting their careers were charged with taking care of the minting of coins, and they used the designs on these coins to enhance their image. They got very creative with it, especially in the 1st century BC, when we see a completely new designs each year in an explosion of creativity. So let's check out today's coins. Let us start with this piece from 126 BC, struck under the Triumvir monetalis Gaius Cassius. This is a pretty common type, featuring the helmeted bust of Dea Roma on the obverse. Dea Roma was the incarnation of the city of Rome. You will find a ton of earlier Republican denarii with this kind of design. And the only variation really is that sometimes Roma is engraved in a fine style. In the case of this one, well, the bust is somewhat pedestrian looking, although it has some very high relief. We can see that the flan received a super strong strike when it was made. But what I want to call your attention to is this little monogram to the left of Roma's head. You see, the denarius was initially introduced as a 10-ass piece, the ass being a big, heavy bronze coin. But as the years passed, the ass started to lose weight. What I mean is that the mint started issuing these with less and less metal. People caught on with the trend and they started demanding more than 10 asses per silver denarius. Around the time this coin was made, nearly a century after the denarius was introduced, the denarius was already worth 16 asses. So what we have here is a monogram that contains the Roman numerals 10, 5, and 1, so 16. Basically, the mint caught on to the fact that the market did not accept this coin as a 10-ass piece anymore. So it made no sense to put a number 10 on the coins anymore like they were doing previously. So they just changed the denomination number to reflect reality, one of the very first instances of monetary inflation in Roman history. On the reverse we have Libertas, the goddess of liberty, riding a quadriga, a chariot pulled by 4 horses. She holds on her outstretched hand a pileus, a cap given to slaves when they were freed. This type of reverse on early denarii can seem kind of samey, repetitive when we first start collecting this type, but once you realize the typical deity riding a chariot motif actually has tons of different varieties with different gods and goddesses riding chariots that can be pulled by 2 or 4 horses, you start to realize there's quite a bit of diversity in this type. So under the horses, you have the abbreviation of the magistrate's name, and under that we have Roma written in bold letters. A lovely little coin. And notice the toning. The toning is really nice. Let's then move to this piece from the year 108 BC. This is an example on how traditional Roman aristocratic families used the position of Triumvir monetalis to promote their political agenda. Here we have a piece struck by a member of the Fonteia family, an old Roman family with records going back as far as the 3rd century BC, whose members held this position for mint master quite a few times. In this case, we have Manlius Fonteius. Manlius here picked Castor and Pollux to be featured on the obverse. We have the Jugate busts of the divine twins, both looking to the right, with 2 stars above their heads, which was another symbol for them. The reason they picked these deities to be shown on their coins was, of course, political. The Fonteia family came from Tusculum, a city in the Latium region that worshipped Castor and Pollux. So more than a show of piety, this design makes reference to their homeland. Of course, they wouldn't lose an opportunity of making a reference to their homeland, right? Heading to the reverse, we have this lovely design of a trireme, the main type of warship used by the Romans. Notice it has this long beak at its prow, the rostrum, which they used to make a hole in the hulls of an enemy vessel. So water, they would make this massive hole, they would ram the other ship, it would make this massive hole, water would come in, and they would sink. It's full of detail, it's quite a fun design. Now, Why a ship? There is a bit of a dispute on the reason. Some claim it makes reference to the exploits of one of Manlius's ancestors, a very successful naval commander. Others claim it is merely a continuation of the Castor and Pollux obverse. If you know a bit about Greek mythology, you probably read the Argonauts, a tale of a band of brothers on board the ship Argo. Castor and Pollux were part of this mythical crew, so here's a reference to the adventurous nature of the divine twins. Finally, on the top of the galley, we have the Monier's initials, Man Fonteius. Alright, next piece. This one was struck in 85 BC. This denarius was struck by Lucius Iulius Bursio. The cognomen Iulius indicates this fellow was a member of the Julii family, so he was most likely a distant relative of Julius Caesar, which could have indeed be the case. You know, when this coin was struck, 85 BC, Julius Caesar was a teenager, around 15 years old, so we might be looking at a coin issued by a distant cousin of him, slightly older than Caesar. On the obverse we have Apollo, quite a common god on late Republican Denarii. In this case, however, we have Apollo Veiovis. So Veiovis was one of the oldest Roman gods, and we don't know a whole lot about him. He was initially considered, how can I put it, a part of Jupiter, the king of the gods, of course. So the dark side of Jupiter in a way. Veiovis was a vengeful god, of rage, sometimes even associated to an early Roman idea of hell. In some other coins, Veiovis is shown carrying Jupiter's thunderbolt, sometimes a javelin, and he's always shown with a somewhat angry expression. And I would say in our coin, he doesn't look particularly happy here either. His myth, now here's a curious thing, his myth changed with the centuries. In a way, he became more benign, Veiovis. He lost this character of an evil god. Apollo, on the other hand, is of course a much more benign, light-hearted fellow. He was the god of music, of sunlight, of dawn, of beauty. So we have quite an interesting mix here. A god that was supposed to be this dark side of Jupiter, but depicted as the handsome and nice Apollo. He also shows quite a few syncretic references to other gods. Let me illustrate what I mean. So apart from the youthful bust of Apollo, notice he has a pair of little wings on his head. So that's odd, right? This is a symbol typically associated with Mercury, the god of commerce. We also have behind his head a trident, a symbol of Neptune, the god of the seas. The end result of this mythological melange is actually quite nice, especially with the very large flan of this coin, which helps the design stand out a bit more. On the reverse we have once again a quadriga, the four-horse chariot, this time being ridden by Victory, carrying a laurel wreath. This piece was struck during the Social War, when Rome fought against its rebelling Italian allies, so this could represent Rome's victories over her foes. Under the design, as usual, we have the name of the Monier, Lucius Iulius Bursio. Next, we're advancing just 1 year forward, to 84 BC. This year, something unusual happened at the mint. This coin was not made under the authority of a triumvir monetalis, but by an aedile. Aediles were magistrates elected yearly. If you ever wanted to become consul one day, you had to serve a number of years as in a series of positions, a series of magistracies. One of such positions was that of an aedile. These men were responsible for the running of the internal affairs of the city of Rome. Think about public administration, everyday maintenance affairs, organizing games and public festivals. The aediles were in charge of all of this. Sometimes an aedile needed extra funds for some sort of special event. When this happened, they had to ask the Senate for permission to issue coins, so they could pay for such expenses. This is what we have here. This denarius, struck under Publius Furius Crassipes, features on the obverse the bust of Cybele, also called Magna Mater, the Great Mother by the Romans. Cybele was the patron deity of cities and settlements. She protected those who sought refuge behind city walls, and as we can see on her head, she wears city walls as a crown. In my opinion, Publius here did a stellar job choosing the design for this coin. Nothing like a coin featuring the goddess of cities issued by a magistrate responsible for the running of a city, right? We can also see another cool detail on this obverse, the abbreviated legends Ediles Curules, showing this coin was indeed a special issue authorized by the edile, by the aediles. On the reverse, we have a bit more of a personal propaganda on the part of Publius here. There were two types of ediles, the plebeian ediles and the patrician ones, also called curule ediles. In practical terms, they were almost identical in their tasks, but generally, the patrician ones organized the more prestigious events, such as games and festivals, while the plebeians took care of everyday affairs. Another perk of these ediles of noble birth, only the ones of noble birth, was that they were allowed to carry a little chair called a curule chair, hence their name, curule ediles. Everywhere they went on business, they had this little chair that they could sit on as they arrived to a place and took care of business. So what we have here is a lovely, highly decorated curule chair with its typical legs on a cross pattern. On top of it, we can see some sort of fabric, likely a very fluffy and comfy pillow. Our friend Publius here did not like his toga rubbing against some rough fabrics, that's for sure. And on the chair, we have his name, Publius Furius Crassipes. As always, for these coins, it's important to pay attention to what was happening in Rome's history to understand the coin and the choice of design a bit better, to understand what was going on, to see why they put that stuff on the coin. This denarius was issued the year the First Mithridatic War ended. This might explain the extra use of funds on part of the edile that year. Maybe some games or festivals were thrown to celebrate Rome's victory against Mithridates, and some of the spoils brought back to Rome were coined to pay for the event. Who knows? And for the last coin of the day, we have another member of the Fonteia family. This coin was made in 55 BC by Publius Fonteius Capito. The year 55 BC was very interesting. It was the beginning of the end of the Roman Republic. The first triumvirate, an alliance between Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, was a major blow to the legitimacy of the Roman Senate. This year, Pompey and Crassus were elected as consuls, while Caesar was waging war in Gaul. The three men ruled Rome in practical terms, trampling over all of the other senators. The next couple of decades would see the complete erosion of the old Senate's authority, and the end of the Republic at the end and the beginning of the Empire. But for the moneyers, at least for now, it was business as usual. Publius here seems to have picked up on the belligerent times he was living in, and he picked an ideal deity for his coin, Mars, the god of war. What a wonderful piece, definitely, in my opinion, the coolest design from the coins we're looking at today. We see the young bust of Mars with his helmet up over his head, and on his shoulder he carries a battle trophy made out of the armor of defeated enemies. The legends make reference to the moneyer's public office, Publius Fonteius Publius Filius, so Publius Fonteius, son of Publius, Capito, his other surname, and then Triumvir Monetales. Heading to the reverse, we continue with the warlike theme. This is another very fun design, full of movement and energy. Here we have a cavalryman, quickly galloping from left to right, trampling over two defeated infantrymen. Here, Publius makes reference to one of his ancestors, who had a very successful career as a military tribune. The legends around the design explain the scene. Manlius Fonteius, that's the name of his ancestor. Tribunus Militum, military tribune. And here's something really interesting. When I was doing research about this family, the Fonteia family, it turns out that back in the 3rd century BC, when we see the first records of this family, it turns out this was a plebeian family. But from the many members of the Fonteia family that rose to prominence, with many having reaching at least the position of mintmaster, we can see that through sheer perseverance and a long history of public service, it seems like this family rose through the ranks of Roman nobility. There's even records of a member of the Fonteia family who was consul in 33 BC, so a sign of upwards mobility from the lower to the upper aristocracy. Fascinating. I absolutely love Republican Denarii. They're tons of fun, they're full of history, and they're quite a challenge for those looking to research them in depth. If you want to fully understand what's on the design of these Republican coins, you have to understand at least a bit of Roman and Greek mythology, to understand some gods that show up, Roman history in general, and even some insights of Roman politics. These coins truly are the newspapers of Republican Rome. Now I want to hear from you. Have you got a Roman Republican Denarius? What curiosities did you learn from it? Let us know in the comment section down below. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick episode. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.